time. I'm honored, so thank you for having me. You know, our competition is no longer next door. It's one of those that's now one click away. And your audience doesn't need a degree, or they don't even want a degree in order to use your application or your website. You're just sort of there to experience or engage with whatever you're providing them. Like David was mentioning earlier, I got into UX, you could almost say at a very, very young age, when I started to build these little contraptions as a kid, and I would get excited to show my parents whatever thing I made. And they had a lot of patience to put up with it and encourage, and my goal was always to try to figure out what little thing I could build that they would guess what it was at the beginning without me having to explain it. Sometimes it was this solar panel car contraption or just something weird, and it was always my job to figure, how do I simplify things? How do I make it so that we can all understand the quote-unquote experience. Experience is kind of a loaded word, but that's really what we're all trying to do here. I think the key takeaway is that it doesn't take, and it shouldn't take, a computer science degree. It sort of seems unfair when you look at the amount of jargon in this field that you should have a full degree to even understand or even have the conversation with anybody. And it's a little unfair. But in reality, there's just a few key understandings which can really, really drive success. And if you know how to play the pieces right, you know how to put it together, and really understand your audience, you can be extremely successful. I know what you're thinking, whatever happened in the English language here, but that's an entirely new conversation we'll have another time. So words with friends. Think about this. They did not have to reinvent Scrabble. That was already known. They took an experience that people had and they repurposed it. They used it in a way that drives a social experience. I could have that fun I would have sitting next to somebody at the fireplace and play, but now they're across the country. And that understanding, what they leveraged, really drew success, and they were able to produce some great stuff with it. It was a fundamental understanding of user experience and user-centered design pulled together that drove that. Fortunately for them, they didn't really have to rely on SEO. It sort of fed itself. The beast fed itself and did everything it needed. Obviously there was some driving traffic, but part of the game is also inviting people and getting people included. But for the rest of us, that really doesn't happen. We actually have to use some form of SEO to drive some traffic, and in return, our hope is for some ROI. And for those of us, entrepreneurs, fellow entrepreneurs in the area, there's always this driver early on that you had a vision or success. And if you look at some of the greats in the area and beyond, UX is not a new thing, and it's not something that's just set in the computer industry. This is restaurants, walking into shops, engaging with people. User experience is sort of over-encompassing. You look at Steve Jobs on the left, and he was one of these people that believed that almost the product should be invisible. How many of you seen here product ads for Apple on TV? And if you're lucky, you get a glimpse the last second of the commercial of what the thing is. It's all about the experience. It's all about what you can do. Look at the first iPad commercials. It was all, you can watch video on the couch, you can share pictures with your neighbors, your kids, grandkids can read books with you. Oh, by the way, it's on this little thing. Jeff Bezos from Amazon. This is an earlier picture, you can tell by the amount of hair. Bezos, he brought the shopping experience to our doorstep. This was a revolutionary change. We can now go online and buy something and it shows up. I think way early in the beginning. Other people were doing it, but he really sort of got the ball rolling. And John Lasseter, the third gentleman, he's from Pixar. If you think about what Pixar did, they really extended the cartoon experience to a broader audience. Cartoons really weren't just for kids and then a couple people that were kind of closet enjoyers and didn't want to mention that they watch cartoons still. And they took that audience and that experience to a much, much larger crowd. Look at some of the Toy Stories and those other larger videos, and there's about as much adult humor in those as there is children's humor. The last gentleman you may not recognize, his name is Hans Wilsdorf. You may not recognize him, but you most likely recognize his company. People who have vision can understand the needs of the user almost before they see it. So think back. Prior to World War I, men carried pocket watches. Women wore wristwatches. it was not seen as a favorable thing. It was actually a quote that said that he wouldn't be caught doing such an undefined thing. He said it would more likely catch him in a dress than it would be wearing a watch. But think of what a watch did. A watch enabled us, as a society, to pick a location or pick something and say, we're going to meet here at 10 o'clock. And now we had an apparatus that enabled us to meet in a specific location. That's a very powerful thing that if you think about in wartime, can be really useful. You build this entire strategy, we're all going to take this bunker at the same time, let's check watches. But prior to World War I, if you think everyone had a lot of pocket watches, meaning you had to open up your coat, pull out the watch, check, possibly cold, really cumbersome, not exactly a good experience as much as it is to slide your coat open. So now, if you see how closely resembled it is to a pocket watch, it's just on a fine strap, you then reach out and get a better audience and people that are more willing to accept it because of the fact that it came out of people that went to war. They wore it, so it must be acceptable for me as an everyday man to wear this watch on my wrist, which was called a wristlet at the time. So as a gentleman, he actually realized, looking into the future, looking to the need of the user and designing an experience for that enabled him to embrace it when it came back from war. So how do we get people to exercise more? How do you get people to do something that's fundamentally boring? Really change their perception. Is there something you can do in design, something you can do in your offering, your product offering that really changes the way people think? And I think one of the big things is that design really can change perception. I'll play a quick video for you. So let's go back in time.
Commercial?
What's that?
That was a Volkswagen commercial?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
They do a lot of stuff with startups.
Yeah, fun experiences. It's kind of neat. So let's go back in time, 1985, to some relatable solution or a situation that we've all been a part of. You're confronted with the unknown, and you're looking to seek an answer. You have a leak in your house. You're not a plumber. You go into the sink and you pull this out. You have absolutely no idea what this is. You know it's broken, and you know this isn't a good situation. And so what do? You go off to Home Depot. And you aimlessly walk up and down the aisles looking for the part. There's some signage, so it kind of points in the right direction. You get a sense of where you're going to go, but you really don't know what you're looking for. You just have this thing. What's this experience like? It's awful. It's time-consuming. It's frustrating. So now fast forward, 2012. And what's changed? Now you don't have to walk up and down the aisles. You can let your fingers do the walking. You can use Google, Bing, Yahoo, whatever your choices are. So let's be inclusive here. And you start your search. So what do? You've got this part. You type in logically plumbing supply. All right, we've got options. Wait a second here. 94 million. Seriously? So going through this is just going to be like going down the aisles of Home Depot. It's going to be frustrating, time-consuming. It's a horrible experience. So aren't you glad we've traveled time and we still have this issue? If you think about it though, this is where SEO comes in to help solve the problem. It helps us find our way. It helps us understand what we're potentially looking for. SEO is really trying to figure out, based on what you're asking a search engine, driving you the right results back. And the more refined those are, the better that they feel they've helped you answer this question, to whittle down this 94 million down to a couple. I think the interesting thing to point out is that in red, that's paid. About 12% of traffic goes here, but 80% plus marketing spend is spent in this area. Organic takes up about 88% of traffic. It makes 15% of the marketing budget spent here. I think the interesting thing to note, though, that you should pay attention, is that paid is pay for play. You put the $1.50 in, you get the $1.50 results. You stop paying, it stops playing. If you fundamentally build in your SEO strategy into the structure of your online experience and you do it right, it returns. It does its return for you. I always like to point out to people, it's sort of kind of doing it backwards so you can see, but you had SEM, which is paid, and SEO. Over time, it should be one of these. And SEO should be what the driver of your majority of your traffic is. You do it right. The interesting about SEO is, much like in real estate, location, location, location. No matter how much you pretty up this house, no matter what paint color you choose, nothing is going to help. It is what it is. It's absolutely horrible. You do some landscaping, it's not really going to change it. So if you look at the distribution of traffic, 36.4% goes to the first slot. You get down to 12.5 in the second slot, and look how quickly it starts to drop. You're almost more better off going for page 2, first slot. So there's a little bit more of a bump of traffic there. But it's a zero-sum game. Pretty much the top people are the ones that win. You can think of it as the modern day Wars of Waldo, right? You have millions and millions of sites out there, all competing with customers to find you. And there are literally thousands of things that you can do in your online experience that can drive a change in traffic. And really what they're looking for is a visual clue. What we're looking for is to be able to find you in this crowd. You think about SEO. SEO is the process of improving the visibility of a website and search engines through the natural or unpaid. That was the green section at the beginning. That's what all SEO is about. And there's literally hundreds of details behind this. The problem is it's a black box. And not everyone knows all the little details that are involved, and they constantly change. What was important yesterday is not important today. What was weighted more important yesterday is not weighted as important today. There's strategies and tactics that make you more visible and attractive to the right kind of search user, and those are both on-site and off-site. And more increasingly, a lot of social trending stuff is really helping to drive some traffic. And at its core, SEO is about revenue. At least that's how we see it. It's about revenue. And SEO is really trying to answer three basic questions. What's this site or page about? How authoritative is it? And when and where should I serve it up in search results? And that's all SEO is trying to really figure out. So how does it work? Basically, spiders get deployed out to sites, and they scan and read the content. And they look at these on-board, off-site things, and they look at social, and they try to decide how all of this stuff is, and they kind of rate it, and they give a score in a roundabout way. And they ascribe proper weight and authority to different areas. And they use this to index and to properly categorize, so that when I put that plumbing supply search at the beginning, my site selling plumbing supplies shows up. But it doesn't look at your pictures, it looks at the code. They can't see the picture. They have no idea what it's about. This is what the fighters try to understand what pages are about. The clues are all within the code, and that's how it works. Remember newspapers? Remember those? They've been around for centuries, and they've evolved over the years. There's been changes in market consumption. There's been adjustments and changes in structure for revenue models that have changed. But at the end of the day, content was still king, right? That's what made a newspaper last. They all had relatively the same story, but the person who, or the newspaper who provided that in an engaging way, or in a way that was easy for me to understand and easy for me to consume, won. That's who I would go back and pick up the paper. There's only so many big stories, and they all have the same stories. SEO is structured the same way. If you want to understand how fundamentally baked in is your SEO strategy. Is it part of your H1 tags? Is it part of your title tags? Is it embedded within links? Is it part of the navigational structure of your site? Is there natural URLs? I always explain it this way. If I bought a house, right, if I bought your house, and all I had to do was go up there and change the name on the mailbox, that's not that hard, right? It's pretty easy for me to do. But if you wrote your last name in bricks on the front of your house, for me to change that is very, very difficult. It's structurally built into your house. It's part of the experience. And search starts to look at the same thing. They start to attribute more weight to items which are fundamentally baked into an experience that are much harder to change. That's why your title tags, your H1 tags, natural URLs. That's why all of those elements, especially in your navigation, those pieces that are fundamentally not going to change overnight, that gets more weight. So you've got your structure right. So we figured out how to build this properly. And now it's come to figure out how authoritative are you. And the interesting thing about SEO is it's very much like middle school. Remember middle school? Kind of fun, minus all the hormones. No idea what we're doing. I think the interesting thing with middle school is that there's one fundamental thing we all learn. That if the cool kids thought you were cool, you were probably cool. And if more cool kids thought you were cool, then you must be really cool. SEO is the same way, right? If authoritative sites say you are the person to look towards, or the site to look towards for specific types of content, and it's great sites, like the White House points to you and says, you're the one, or NASA points to you and says, this person knows stars. Chances are you must be really, really cool. You're the one that everyone's going to point to. Your links are all built to describe value pointing back, and they're coming from the right people in the right context, and it's structured the right way. So all this value is coming back to your site. But it's not just building links from tens of thousands of kind of worthless sites. They're from the right structured sites, and there's an art to doing that. And it takes a long time, but the cooler the site is, the more structured, the better chance you have of moving up because they're seen as more authoritative. So a great example from a presentation I saw from Vanessa Fox. So in Hyundai, in 2009, they ran an ad campaign for the new Honda Genesis Coupe. Brilliant idea to get race car drivers. They're the best in the world, right? They make a car perform amazingly, things you could never do. It's wonderful. And so then they produced this video. Let me show you the commercial. It's pretty quick. It's a little bit. Pretty cool idea. And Billy Corgan was still pretty cool back then too, so we're hitting the mark here so far. So brilliant idea. You run this campaign, you spend a ton of money, your advertising firm spends a ton of money building this thing out. What better time to show this, the largest audience? You got the Super Bowl. Super Bowl 43, 2009. You spend $15 million on advertising, buy yourself a couple shots, We all know everyone watches the commercials, and we all know that the spike in traffic around that time is pretty much the same. Everyone's surfing for Super Bowl ads to go re-enjoy and experience it. And so it would be obvious that you would type in edit your own. I mean, it really pretty much told me, so I would do a Google search, and this is what I get. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. $15 million in advertising. A great campaign. Nothing. I get basically articles about my campaign. I don't even get the website. So you promised me this great experience. You promised me that I'm going to go online and I'm going to edit my own. It's Billy Corgan music, a great car, and I'll get to do this myself, and this is what I get. And why is that possible? Why did that happen? I built it in Flash. It's completely invisible. At a minimum, they could have pulled the text from a text file outside so I'd have something to scrape. But no. Text flashes a video. It's a picture. That's all it is. It's a running picture. And unless you tell the spider what's inside that, because remember, it can't see pictures. It only sees objects and text and code. This is blind. So they had this great experience and they missed the mark. Nobody could see it. But they had a good idea because they gave it a great user experience, right? How much fun is that? You're trying to sell a new car and get people to build their own videos. Back in that time, when you think 2009, that was a pretty neat idea to do. It would drive a lot of good buzz and people would socially share it, so what better way to get your message out? The problem is that experiences not delivered were not satisfied. I wasn't able to find it. Kind of lost. So what is UX? UX and UCD, user-centered design, they're kind of loaded terms here. They become sort of catch-alls for things. UX is often defined as a person's perception and responses that result from the use of an anticipated product or service or system. And user-centered design, that on the other hand is a design philosophy. It's a process in which the needs, wants, and limitations of end users are given extensive attention. I always see UCD as sort of the U part of the user experience. It's kind of the hidden part that no one really talks about, but user-centered design methodologies are sort of really what drives that thing. You know, whether it's a toll booth or a concert or a restaurant with good or bad experience, that's all user experience. And I think we sort of defined it as technology and it has to be application or service-based, but really user experience is all around us. And the problem is you can have a great company, you can even have a great product, you can spend lots of money on it. However, if the user experience is frustrating, you have some serious problems. It all goes back to Home Depot, right? I'm trying to find that part. I'm on limited time here. I have well, I'm assuming a bad situation at home because I don't even know what the part does, but it has a hole in it. And so, if you think about it, that's a bad experience, and people remember those experiences as they engage with stuff. I think it's possibly a process chart that may be familiar to some of you in this room of how this is coming together. This is a typical process chart. Usually you often refer to user experience design. People will show this and say this is their UX process, the process for doing things. I think when you look closely at this, UCD is really part of the research part at the beginning. It's how we understand the audience. It's how we really understand their wants and needs and drives. We do this through market research, product research, some usability to make sure we hit the mark, consumer research. Because at the end of the day, there are multiple ways that people look at and understand your system. There's you and your audience. We all know there's three basics, right? There's data, there's the logic, and there's the user interface. But in reality, it's all magic to the user. They have no idea how this stuff works. They want an experience. They want to engage. They want to buy a product. They want, you go to a restaurant, you want to order a meal and you want to sit down. You don't, well, you hope it's not microwaved, but you don't really want to know what's going on back there. You just want a really good meal and you want a good experience and you want everything tightened up in a nice little bow for you. And there are different perspectives of outcomes in that journey. And however, considering it's all magic, we want to really figure out a way to understand our audience. And that's really the big driver in user-centered design and UX. Understand their wants and needs, design for those in mind. The thing is, we can't be mind readers. You have to figure out how to engage and understand what your audience needs and what they want. So this is my daughter, Tula. She's going to be 2 in August. So she recently comes up to me with her little stuffed animal, Jojo. I expect her to tell me a story, want me to hold her, whatever. One of those many list of items that she wants me to do when she brings up a stuffed animal. But this time she turns to me and she says, "Poopy from?" Huh? She's really big in the whole diaper thing right now, so that's where the context is. But if you think about it, even my closest family member, somebody who I spend day in and day out with, and I still have no idea what's going to come out of her mouth. How is that possible? How could we go about and design an experience and never engage an audience if I can't figure out what's going in her head on something that she does almost hourly to me? There's no other way. So what we wind up doing is we wind up building and running focus groups, and they can be formal or informal. Usually led by a moderator, usually some directed questions, hopefully done in a way that a primary sort of alpha person in the group doesn't run everything. You want some sort of input from people. Throughout the design process, we do usability studies. We check to make sure that what we were thinking and what we designed really does map back to that end user and they really do get it. And we make tweaks, and I sometimes hear, well, if we just tested that with 8 people, or we just tested that with 12 people, how can I say that's going to work for everybody that way? What you actually tend to find in usability studies are patterns. One person messes up on a task, fluke. 7 of 8 don't get it. There's a pretty high likelihood you could do some multiplication tables here that it's a much higher number when it starts to roll it out. And so what you're trying to do when you're doing a usability study is find where the hiccups are. You should design a study that's natural, that makes sense, that fits in with the model, that you're not having them run through tasks so that they can see and you can see, and trust me, it's a very, very humbling experience to sit across and watch. But your audience needs and those features for your product and your website, they're what drive the foundation of the design. The more feature, the larger the feature sets, the more engineering you need. You want to make sure that that overall structure that you design and develop can support the features, can scale to the needs that you have. You don't want to build it so big that it seems lost and cumbersome. You don't want to make it so small that every time you want to add a new product or service, you have to throw away your entire navigational model. I always liken it back to defining the structures are sort of like the blueprints of a house. Your goal is that you don't finish this gorgeous house. It's perfect, beautiful views, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, media room, everything you want, and the front door is on the 3rd floor and there's no steps. Right? How many of you have been in a house where you've walked through and you go, it's kind of funky? You have no idea what am I going to do with this room now? It's going to become storage. It's completely wasted space. No matter how well everything else is, I automatically know coming in I have to do some demo in this place. And it's the same thing when a person comes through your website or comes through your experience. Everything should be put in a logical place for them. It should be something that maps back to the mental model that the user comes to the table with. Most people in here drive, right? Or see a car, understand, right? we all get brake, gas, right? Steering wheel. 9 times, every single time I've seen a car, it's been in the front seat. May swap to the left or the right seat, depending on the country I'm in, but that's what it is. As long as I start with that, I'm good. If I put the brakes and the gas and the steering wheel in the back seat, the first thing the user's going to do when they come to my new car is be completely lost. They're going to have to relearn everything because the steering wheel is in the back seat. But if I start with that fundamental understanding that they have, I start with the steering wheel in the right spot, the gas and the brakes in the right spot. I can have doors that fly open. I can have a 5-door. I can put 20 wheels on this thing if I wanted to. As long as the fundamentals of the steering wheel and the gas and brake work back to how I expect it when I sit in the car, as long as I can map back to that, I'm fine. And you should think about that with your experience. Because at the end of the day, there's a lot of emphasis that needs to be placed on interaction and navigation of a website. and an application. You ever been to a website that has a very sort of shoddy experience? You get there, something's off, you're not quite sure what it is, but you know there's no way you're pulling out your credit card and putting it in this thing. You probably think you might have downloaded a virus just even visiting it. All of that whole package is what really wraps up and gives you confidence and comfort, so that it really checks the box that says, yes, regardless if I like this product or not, I'm comfortable buying here, and I'm willing to proceed forward with the entire online experience. So think about this, you're in Boston. You need to travel from one part of the city to the next. You don't have the luxury of a taxi. In my scenario, you don't. You might get lucky and have one. So you grab a map, and you go underground on the tube, right? And the interesting thing, and the great thing they've done here is they've tied elements together that reinforces the experience. The trains are color-coded to the map. So I know when I get there and I sit down and I say I gotta be on a blue line, I know what the blue line is. Other cities have tried. There's been attempts. If you've been in New York, unfortunately they're all metal and there's no other real color, and you just hope that that was the right one. It's just brutal. But the more that I start to tie this experience together, the more comforting it makes the end user. The more comfortable I feel getting into the subway that I may actually pop up in the right spot of Boston I'm supposed to get to, in an area I'm not familiar with. This is an interesting, very core experience. I think the catch why this is interesting is this is Jacob Nilsson's site. And I'm not sure how many of you in the room are familiar with Jacob Nilsson, but he's a luminary in our field of user-centered UX design. He's been speaking on it for years. He's, one could argue, the founder of usability. I mean, there are so many things that get propped up to Jacob Nilsson. And this is his website. There's absolutely no navigation. Now, in his defense, he has written articles to why he doesn't have navigation, and I praise him for going the extra mile of writing the article. Though I would have liked to see that effort spent on designing a navigation. That would have been nice. But it's very interesting that the person that's a luminary in this field has a site that looks like this. And the only navigation is when you click one level in the upper left-hand corner. Those are called breadcrumbs. Back to the old day where you did breadcrumbs, you know how to get back. That's it. All I can do is get back. I've actually lost all context of every other place on the site. I have no idea where I'm at. All I can do is go back. Absolutely horrible. On the other extreme, use something like Box. Everyone know what Box is? Box.net? They are basically an online storage solution. Right? Does anyone care if it's done on the cloud? I sure don't. I don't care at all. I do care that it's simple, that it's safe, secure. Those are important to me. I'm your typical audience here. What's even better is that they built the navigation with me in mind. For personal, for business, for enterprise. I can automatically go right in. I know where I'm going to be classified. And then they can tailor that content to me. I can design it in a way that makes me feel comfortable. They've also backed it with the right logos of companies that I can look towards and say, you know, well, if they're comfortable with it, then I should be comfortable with it. And if they use it, it's got to be safe, especially for some of these big players that I'm pretty sure are pretty cautious about their data getting out. So a great, great experience. One of the things you may want to consider and look out for, though, is avoid UX cliches. Considering this is a field that's sort of encompassing and sort of loaded in a lot of stuff, we find a lot of these little cliches that people love to say. Oh, it should never be X, or it should never be Y. I think one of the big ones you hear is this concept of the 3 clicks rule. And the thought is that in e-commerce, the more clicks, the less purchased. Users who are clicking the back button multiple times are the ones that are failing. It's another quote. Was it the number of clicks that mattered? Or was it something else that's causing them to fail? Right? If all we're looking at is the clicks, then how can I make the hypothesis that it's failing? You know, on the surface, the 3-click rule actually makes sense, right? If users can't find what they're looking for in the first couple minutes, they get frustrated and they leave. There's actually people that have written about this. I don't know if you know Jeffrey Zeldman. He's an influential designer. He's written a bunch of books, done a bunch of speaks. He's great. One of the things he wrote, though, is that it's based on the way people use the web. And he says, quote, "The rule can help you create an intuitive, logical, hierarchical structures." Problem is, if we had followed that rule, we would have failed. Claxton came to us, better part about a year and a half ago. Right before they were sold to L'Oreal they were making about $110 million a year before they were sold. And we spent time interviewing and understanding the audience needs, and understanding what they were really trying to accomplish. Claxton has an amazing product. I don't know how many of you here know what it is, but it's a premium face exfoliating brush. It's awesome. And it's $300. Now this is a market that will spend money on this, but not right off the bat. We need to know that you have a solution to our problem. And they had a buy now button on the homepage next to a $300 price point. One would have thought most firms would come in and say, well, we took you from 5 clicks to 3, all right, we did good. And in this case, that wasn't what was needed. What was needed here is that the purchaser needed to be educated throughout the entire buy process. We actually elongated the purchasing process here. We added more steps to buying. Through progressive disclosure, we also provided ways for people to purchase the product throughout the cycle, but by the time they got to the purchase, it was sold. It had sold itself. With that, we actually started to extend that across, all the separate pages, all the underlying pages. Within the first 30 days, we had a 58% increase in e-commerce conversion rate. We had a 300% jump in targeted products, which are the brushes and lotions, which is really where your money's made. And visitors on time rate went up 42% for time on site to over 6 minutes. Imagine 6 minutes on a website. Leading with price and reducing clicks can be detrimental to your audience if you understand your audience needs. If you spend the time at the beginning and understand what they do and how they work, that really can change the design direction you take. So I'm not sure how many people are familiar with word lights. We moved in a very saturated market, right? Translation. How many people have seen books upon books in stores on, English to Spanish, Spanish to English? They have online websites that help you do all this stuff. They took a different approach. Just check it out real fast. This one's good. Pretty cool take on a saturated market, if you think about it. The cool thing is it's done in context. How many of us are going to travel with our phones? How many of us don't want to pay for roaming? How many of us will go to another country and go, I kind of recognize 2 of those words from my classes in college, but not enough to feel comfortable with that whole sentence. So you enable yourself to really travel comfortably and understand what's going on. I think the important thing is how they design the site. Right? Pretty obvious it's for the iPhone. Doesn't really need to tell me. But they do, so that a spider can scroll it. Travel, confidence, they use all the right keywords to make me feel good about what I'm going to do. Makes this purchase relatively easy. One of the resources I'll show you later that shows you how this works, but this is a way that a spider sees it. When a spider does a crawl, this is what it reads. And as you can see, wordlet, the word dictionary involved, travel confidence, the wordlet instantly translates. It pulled all of that text that was there, and it can read it, which means it can crawl it, which means it can index it. So that if someone starts to search for translation items, it would start to show up based on how many other things they get right. But this is a very good first step. So quick question. Do you guys have, what's a fun, addictive, complete time waster of a game?
Angry Birds.
Of course. So what's the ROI for the end user here?
5 minutes of relaxation.
Exactly. 5 minutes, sometimes longer, doing absolutely nothing, completely mindless. It cost me $1. I would spend 10 times that to be able to do that every day, right? And surely not to learn physics or trajectory, which is really what the game does, because that would be pretty boring to play. It's just fun. It's mindless. And something that costs $1 provides a $1.2 billion valuation. Depending on who you talk to, that's the lowest number. I've heard it as high as 8.8, but we'll swing on the low end for this one. For a $1 game. They actually did something really smart too, because if you've ever played the game, inside, it came out about, I don't know, a year ago, less than a year ago. For those of you that don't like to try to beat a level and get very frustrated, for another $1, it'll beat it for you, and you go to the next level. Brilliant. I've never done that feature, because once I get in the habit, it would happen way too often. But very smart. So going back, remember this from earlier? And how all the pieces fit together? Think of all the pieces that roll in under research, concept definition, design, and implementation. We said you're doing fundamental structured things at the research part. Contextual inquiries. Spend time with your end user, if you can, using your system or using your application in the context of how it's going to be used. We did a project for Kodak. We redesigned basically their entire experience that works for dental software, dental practices. And we went to the East Coast and spent some time on the West Coast and over in Europe, and we watched how dental offices use the software. Doing so really enabled us to design an experience that mapped back to what they were comfortable with. Kodak really thought they had the smartest users in the world. No. They just figured out how to use the horrible experience of Kodak. That's all they figured out. And they actually had weekly meetings where they would give each other hints and tricks and tips on how to get through an experience. And we actually went and spent a little time with them, and Kodak had given us these users as people to investigate and spend time with, and they said, you know, we think some of them may not like us. We're not quite sure. And so we asked. They said, we feel like we're being held hostage. This is horrible. We would jump ship if we could. And so we went back to Kodak and said, well, you're kind of right. But there's certain things. We can fix the experience of getting them there. But much like user experience is all-encompassing, when they call you for support, pretend to care. Actually engage them and help them out. You can't do one thing right and really whiff it on another. The entire engagement, anytime a customer engages with your company, that's all part of the user experience. It's not just the app you design, it's not just the website you produce. If customer care is rude, then it affects the website. The entire thing is all tied together. You get into concept definition, that's where everyone hears about wireframes and interaction flows and interaction maps. Those are all just really buzzwords where you go back to designing that structure. Much like the house, the blueprints of the house. We look at that, we go, okay, yeah, there's 3 bedrooms. We expect that the architect put a light switch in there. Hopefully ran power to it. All those underlying things, you don't really care about when you're walking through the house. Those are just expected. And when you're designing an experience, you want to make sure that the items that are expected in the experience from your end users, that's why you understand what they want, really make their way in there, so you don't lose them. The interesting thing is that's where you start to overlay your SEO experience. That's where you start to overlay all the fundamental elements that make up SEO. Much like you would do keyword personas for your research part. If everyone knows what a persona is, it's sort of an embodiment of a typical type of user. So we can all look back and say, this persona does X, this persona does Y, and that's what we would design around. Same thing with search. Anyone here have young kids? For those that have young kids that have ever had to do a search online for something, it is a much different surfing experience than if you don't have young kids, or if your kids are slightly older. And if you're designing a product or a solution or a suite for stay-at-home moms or new mothers, think about that. They don't have time to meddle around on your site and find things out. If they're there to purchase one thing, they're there to get in and get out. They have 2 minutes between that time. It's a much different audience and a much different experience than someone who's retired who may want to spend all the time, or surfing online at your office. It's a different engagement. And so we overlay all these things. We make sure the text automation makes its way into the navigation architecture. We make sure that that strategy that you're using for SEO is built in fundamentally. And then when you get to implementation, the development part, do no harm. All the stuff that you worked hard for on your UX side, on your SEO strategy, make sure it makes its way in. And make sure you don't set up stuff where we've seen no follows have been turned on. You've done all this work, you tell the spider not to follow. Or you forget an XML sitemap, right? Spiders don't come in from the front door. They come in from anywhere. They need to be able to land on site, land on a page, and figure out what this entire site's about. And if they come into this page and they think it's one page because they can't see anything else, and the page and that content isn't good, and you obviously aren't authoritative in any aspect, the likelihood that spider's coming back anytime soon is slim to none. So you want to make sure that when they land on the site, they can navigate through, they can understand what's going on. Much like when your user comes to the site, it's designed for them in mind. When it comes to your application, it's designed for them in mind. So really, do we know the future of SEO and UX? There's no magic fortune teller machine, no idea. But it's a safe bet. I think that top slot in organic is going to be prime real estate moving forward. What the little details are going to be that are making you in slot one, no one knows. Probably going to change tomorrow. But we're pretty sure that that's going to be a prime location. And I guarantee you that your users are going to expect a really, really good experience when they come to your website. They're going to expect that it's easy to use, that they get the information that they want, that they feel comfortable when they meddle around your site, or they'll leave. It's interesting, UX during early stages of product planning and throughout the development cycle significantly reduces time and money associated with later design changes. Product costs about 25% less to produce when UX is in place. That's a wide range between $200 and $100, but even at its low end, it's a 2-for-1 return. That's not bad, if you think about it. Interestingly, there was an investment fund put together, Make Believe. It was inspired by Jeannie Ray and the Design Council. And they believe that companies that deliver a great experience will see it reflected in their stock price. And so what they did is they invested $50,000. They took $5,000 per company, and the rule was they had to hold the share for at least 1 year. And they picked companies that demonstrated care in product and web design, a history of innovation, their loyal customer base, positive business-to-business experience. In the 1 year, they gained 39.3% return. Most recently, they wrapped up at 65.12%. Pretty impressive when you think that the NASDAQ did 18.9, the NASDAQ 100 did 26.81, S&P did 9.47, and the New York Stock Exchange did 14.67 during the same year. So if you think of your website, you're the seasoned entrepreneur, and you've done a great job of starting up, you've got your investors in place, you've got all your pieces in there, you've had some wins, you've had some losses, you're an entrepreneur, we've all been there, the ups are ups and the downs are downs. But you really are trying to reach your right audience, and when you reach them, you're really trying to give them something that makes them remember you. The text. Are you using phrases that are not only targeted for search, but also resonate with your audience. This stuff makes sense. You've heard of link baiting. People add a bunch of links and a bunch of words and a bunch of stuff and a bunch of jargon that makes no sense. They've actually changed logarithms so they can actually scrape and figure out that your site is keyword stuff and they will drop you in search results. They also look at bounce rates. So if someone comes to your site and then jumps quickly, and everyone does that, then you obviously aren't authoritative and you're obviously being served too high in search results and they'll push you down again. It's a game. But there's high reward when you get to the top. You know, the links, like we said earlier, you know, given search engines deploy spiders, we want to make sure that there's user-friendly access to both the content of the site and the architecture for both the spider and the end user. There's the popularity component, the number and the quality of those links that come to you, how they're referred and how that link structure is designed and built, so that when the link isn't just for your name. No one cares about the name. If they're searching for baby socks, every link that points to a page should be referred to by baby socks. Right? Because that's what's important. So that every time a spider sees it, they go, this must be the source for baby socks. That's where it is. Not Baby Links, which is a company we did some work for. Right? No one knows what Baby Links is, but they're searching for baby socks or baby leg warmers or whatever your product is, that's what it's searching for and that's what it's looking for. And then there's the behavioral component. And you want to accommodate the search terms. Like we said earlier, designing for stay-at-home moms, they experience and they engage with content differently and they do searches differently online. You should understand how that works. And all those things come together and they really help you drive your website up the chain, up the search results, and hopefully to slot one. Interesting thing is it's a fun ride. You know, there's a lot of ups and downs. We don't know how things are going to turn out. There's excitement in the air. It's fun. And I invite you guys to try your hands in SEO and UX and really embrace the philosophies and the principles as you're designing and as you're building your SEO strategies. For those of you that are interested and want to find out some more, there's different resources from site diagnostics that you can use and tools that are out there that help you build strategies behind search and how to understand and what the context is and your likelihood of winning. Sometimes it doesn't mean you get first slot. You just have to be among the players. So it's valuable just to get to slot 4. The traffic's low, but you're on the page. You're with everyone else. Your competition's going to look. For UX, there's white papers and there's tools and calculators that give you a sense of the ROI for UX and really what the value it does it brings to the table. But back to Steve Jobs, you can really thank him and others for forcing that thing that your audience really expects and deserves a really good experience, and you should understand what they're trying to accomplish and design for that.
Which one of those was the one that you showed the
SEO browser. Site diagnostic. Keyword research will give you a sense of the words that are and where they're trending and your ability, not really your ability to move it, so how much competition is going on, and you would go back and understand how strong that site is doing. It gives you a good sense of where things are at. The last two are UX based. The bottom one's a survey tool we use. There's other tools out there. We've used those for understanding if we've picked the right feature sets to use for a project. We did a large project for Expedia, and we built, it was without saying too much, it was an online activity experience. And we built the feature sets based on the competition. And to give you a sense of the competition, if we were to destroy slot 2 and win, we'd have 2% of the market. That's how fragmented the market is. And so what we did is we designed the use case, we designed our scenarios. We said, this is the feature set we're going to do, and we wrote it into our statement of work, and we said, here's what it is. Let's validate that that's what it is. And we did a survey out to, I think it was N equals 400, about 4,000 people, give or take some variance. And what we found in that entire thing was some of the stuff that were hugely important, which we thought were important because we looked at the competition, we said, well, they do it, check, we do it. And they're doing it, and we're going to do it. The audience didn't care for half that stuff. They had certain core things they were looking for, and they said, the other stuff's fine if you get this right. But if I had my choice, I'd like you to do some of these other things. You know, we have a good job of writing surveys that we can get the responses we're looking for and get insights. Had we not engaged with them, we would have designed an experience relatively close to the competition with a much bigger bank account, much more hands-on activities, so we probably had a good chance of winning. But who would have said we've actually reached our audience? We never talked to them. So we stopped the process at the beginning, reached out, found out what was important, changed all the feature sets that we went towards. And then midway through the project, we revalidated the designs of usability studies. Found some interesting key insights that we could have never thought. One interesting one you guys may find. Nobody had a single clue what the Facebook like button was. Had no idea what it was, had no idea what the purpose was, why they would use it, did not get it. Because it was a like with a thumbs up, which is the icon that Facebook gives you. Granted, this test was run about 9 months ago, 8 months ago, so I would expect within the next maybe 3 to 6 months that may change slightly. Just wrapping some text around it says, like us on Facebook, be our friend on Facebook. Something that gave that button context would make it successful. We're in the industry. I never thought about that. Of course it's a like button, it's a thumbs up, what else is it going to be? We put it in the audience and not a single person got it. Make a slight design adjustment, be successful. Now imagine it was something hugely important in your thing. It was the sign-in button. It's the last button you want people to have confusion around. But you'd be surprised in how what are basic, seemingly easy experiences and easy things you design, and you are shocked when you see if they work or not. So usability studies are a great thing to help validate and help level set, help you figure out what's working and what's not.